This was, hands down, the most eventful day to date in my tenure as a reviewer of all things Spawn. These notebooks have been my only outlet, you, my one constant companion, dear reader, and though I made a vow, for the sake of my own hopeful future, to restrict my comments to the critiques, it has been a personal contract I found as impossible to fulfill as Spawn's promise to Malbolgia, and in hindsight, perhaps just as foolish. It's hard to know if Tiny Adam West chose today as my final sparring session with stocky Frank Miller Batman on top of a lengthy video game and review due to my offhanded wish for more training over sleep-inducing Spawn comics, or if that was an untimely and cruel coincidence. But either way, I am extremely lucky to even be writing this entry. Hopefully I'll have finished it before the day is out. I may be cutting it closer than I ever have before. Prior to my physical training session, Tiny Adam West produced a PlayStation 2 out of thin air and said that my subject for review today would be an important component of my battle training, as Spawn in the Demon's Hand has been since I first received it. Not only would this game provide me with ample opportunity to simulate maneuvers with my battle axe, and possibly even inspire me to try out other weapons I had yet to employ, but it would also teach me the valuable lesson of going against an opponent who fights dirty, who doesn't play by any code of honor. If I wanted to defeat the emissary of Coke, Tiny Adam West said, I had to learn to do all that was necessary. I was to beat Spawn Armageddon before my appointment with my cape and cowled instructor. Finishing the game was part of my final test. And when he left, Tiny Adam West took my notebook with him and forbade me to manifest another. I wouldn't be allowed to write this review until, he said, I had seen the last cutscene of the game. I had only previously beaten 2 of the 4 video games for review, and judging game type and era, I imagined this one would be longer than any of them. Spawn Armageddon was released in 2003 by Namco, and a couple hours in, I was begging for Pac-Man in a Spawn cape eating Necro pellets and flashing blue violators. It's a third-person hack-and-slash adventure game similar to God of War, except with a purchasing system for upgrading health, magic, weapons, and buying ammunition. It's unfair to compare them since this game predates God of War by a couple years, and that game revolutionized the genre, but it would have seemed mediocre at best to me even in 2003. It's a gargantuan step up from Spawn the Eternal, but that's like saying an operable tumor is a big improvement over an inoperable one. Yay for being able to turn to the right or left while walking forward instead of stopping first. Yay for not going into a 2D fighting game mode whenever an enemy appears. The basic mechanics are quite solid, and most everything at your disposal is functional. This is the first time I felt like I had all of Spawn's abilities, could use them together relatively fluidly, and yet had logical limitations so I didn't feel too powerful, and there was no challenge. So it's not altogether true to the source material, but a truly faithful game would have you get totally mutilated in every other level, only for a blinding green flash of light or an army of bats to fly out of you and suddenly beat the level, with you retracing your button mashing, trying to figure out how the heck you did it. The Spawn clock has been done away with entirely in favor of traditional, separate meters for health and magic. Both replenish fully after each mission, both can be increased by spending the generous amounts of blue orbs you collect in each level, and sometimes you can replenish them with red health orbs and green energy orbs within a level, though those are harder to come by and are mostly obtained through property damage. So you want to destroy everything you can interact with: chairs, computer monitors, Coke machines. Yeah, take that, emissary of Coke. I wonder if he's training with video games too, and imagining himself blowing up Mountain Dew machines. In my opinion, there aren't nearly enough health or energy orbs in the longer levels, but it's more that the inconsistent length of levels is irritating. Most are quite short. You fight enemies, solve simple puzzles, usually figuring out how to open doors to move on, and then you touch the big shiny Spawn symbol at the end. But just when you become accustomed to how much energy you need to conserve and how long a level is, you get to the docks, which is at least twice as long as the first handful of stages. Certainly I would expect incrementally more difficult levels, except I didn't finally die until I got to the crazy demon bulldozer. And that thing, by the way, should have been an action figure vehicle along with a violator chopper and the monster rig. I realized here that if you die, you go all the way back to the start of the mission. No markers, nothing. Which is incredibly tedious when you get to the later stages, like in Hell, where you have to traverse 3 sections that are by themselves the length of a lot of the other missions. You also go back when you fall into Black Abyss, but at least that doesn't outright kill you, and only starts you at the start of whatever section or room you're in, rather than the beginning of the mission. And as with several other things, it's inconsistent with what falls kill you and which ones just make Spawn growl with irritation. I found one drop in the park that's instant death, while everything up to that point wasn't. And in hell, lava kills you, unless you fall in the greater pit of falling forever openness below you that also looks like lava. I like that I can switch between weapons and powers with ease, up and down on the joypad for powers, left and right for guns, and for once I found all these different range weapons to be pretty useful. In fact, they make most of the bosses ridiculously easy. As long as you're armed to the teeth with plenty of ammo, the bosses require almost no strategy, including the laughably souped up Ultra Battle Mode Redeemer at the end, who is, for some reason, a transformer. He's a tank that turns into a robot scorpion, and I don't know what that has to do with angels or the Christian cross motif, but I beat him in 2 minutes on my first try. When you're out of ammo or trying to conserve it, you can target things with your chains, which are weaker than most guns, but you can hit things pretty rapid fire with them and their range is surprisingly long. I also like that they automatically whip out and grab extra ammo. That's probably my favorite mechanic in the game. The only real strategy is learning which enemies are most susceptible to what kinds of attacks, which they're immune to, and then you attack accordingly. There's not a huge range of enemies, so I got used to what to use when fast. Some are inventive, scary, and really weird, and while I got bored of the same demons over and over, especially the tedious ones that make my monster thumbs numb repeatedly hitting them with the same attack until they go away, I appreciated a few new enemies toward the end, like the space station attendees with their halos on Heaven's satellite. My two biggest complaints, the things that make the game a lot less fun than it could have been, are repetition and the camera. The game is padded with excessive hordes of enemies to make the game longer instead of more vast areas to explore, and how much of where you can go in a given area is incredibly limited. Sometimes thinking you can glide somewhere that turns out to be impenetrable scenery can get you severely injured or killed. At least mix up the cast a bit. These aren't Oompa Loompas. Making me fight the same 3 faceless demons over and over until the level is done screams laziness. I will praise the game for trying to mix up the scenarios and missions, even if it is sometimes confusing as to what the heck I'm supposed to do. Sometimes it's defeating a bunch of enemies, sometimes destroying pieces of equipment, sometimes just getting from point A to B. I wish I didn't have to wait until I got to hell to finally get some platforming action that wasn't just jumping between buildings to touch a bunch of icons or jump around blindly trying to get to platforms I couldn't see. And that brings me to tainting the whole experience complaint number 2. I found myself fighting the camera as much as the demons. You have a 360-degree field of vision theoretically, but when you use the right stick to put the camera where you want it, it snaps back to wherever the AI automatically thinks it should be, which is often the least helpful view imaginable. Half the challenge is fighting enemies I can't see because I'm forced to look at myself. If I wanted to fight like that, I'd wear a blindfold. There are also several grapple points above me I needed to grapple to in order to advance, but I can't see them without jumping. Leaps of faith in the hopes there's something to land on. And walls blocking my entire field of vision so I can't see anything. And if I wanted to play like that, I'd turn around and face the brick wall while I play. And why oh why does the camera go left when I press right and right when I press left? The story is, as you might expect, just a flimsy and poorly conceived framework to provide an excuse for me to be here. I didn't need that, I have to be here. Tiny Adam West said so. And still, makes more sense and is more straightforward than most of McFarlane's comic work, and he's credited for story on this, so good for him. It's harder to write 500 pages of vague villain posturing that never goes anywhere when you've got a player expecting to shoot things. I did get prematurely excited when I saw the title. Armageddon? So I'm gonna face 2 all-powerful entitled toddlers, lose, then become God and remake the world? So it's, what, Spawn Sim City? That sounds awesome! But this isn't that Armageddon, just another one you ultimately prevent, like Urizen, except people probably noticed this one. Spawn sees a big green flash and investigates, running all over Tarnation, fighting escaped demons from hell. At least there's an explanation for the countless enemies. It turns out Heaven has come up with a doomsday weapon to destroy Hell and win the war once and for all. After fighting Redeemer and deciding he can't win, Spawn retreats through one of the fresh hellholes and strikes a new deal with Malebolgia. Yep, FDR Spawn wants Bolgia to make him human in exchange for his destroying the weapon. Always the gallant hero, Hell is ripping Earth apart and he wants his humanity in turn for saving the world. Well, it's the only way he'd ever have any. Spawn's a total opportunist, too. He's only here because he was too chicken to keep fighting Redeemer, even though A, Redeemer wasn't physically repelled by Hell in the comics and, went there, and B, I beat the snot out of Redeemer before Spawn decided he was too powerful. That should have been one of those boss fights you can't win, so the story just progresses. I also think it's funny that you're working your way through Hell to meet with Malebolgia, but if you die, Hell still opens up and Bolgi's arm drags you down with it. I know the idea is still that you've used up your energy and Bolgi owns you now, but the image is awkward. Hell opens inside Hell, and you get dragged under even though you're climbing to get Bolgi. And isn't this what you want right now? To get to Malebolgia? I mean, getting killed should be a shortcut. So Malebolgia agrees to Spawn's terms, or so he thinks, and Spawn lays siege on the Angel's Tower, the neatest and most imaginative section of the game. But first, he has to prove himself against Frenzied Violator. And I'm not making that up, that's his name. And it really makes me wonder why Bolgi is wasting his time trying to convince Spawn to willingly become his general when Violator is literally chomping at the bit for the job, and Frenzied Violator seems made to go up against Metatron, the new and improved Redeemer. Yeah, renaming everybody for battle modes. See, he doesn't just look like a Transformer, he's one letter off from being the Decepticon leader. So after portal hopping all over the space station and blowing up cylinders, Spawn seems to really hate cylinders in this. He fights Metatron, saves the world, but then conniving old Mammon has to smirkingly deliver the bad news. Spawn still can't have his humanity back because, as always, it's all about the fine print. Malebolgia said if the weapon never fires again, he'll restore Spawn's humanity. But of course, the Angels fired it some more before Spawn could tangle with their Scorpion King. Oh, Spawn, you're so dumb. Bolgi's loss, really. It seemed like the perfect chance to say goodbye to his weakest link, but he's not exactly the brightest crayon in the box either. There's a lot of silly contrivances to shoehorn in places and characters. Spawn's looking for the weapon, and Wynn's involved somehow, so we go to his office, but we never see him. And Cygor shows up in the middle of all this, totally unrelated, for the very first time Spawn's ever met him, just to get him in here somewhere. But super silly is in the details. At one point, Mammon, who's sort of guiding Spawn, but he could be written out and you'd have the same game, tells Spawn he needs to meet some people. And in Keith David's awesome, dramatic, would make your grocery list sound exciting voice, Spawn says, "What other information can people provide us?" Kudos to you, Keith David, for somehow reading that line with a straight face. And there's a lot of odd or downright bizarre signage. It's bad enough to advertise Soul Calibur 2, which also features Spawn, in a game like this. Yes, remind me of something I'd rather be playing. But then, in a subway, you've got Johnny B's Ninja Manga Warehouse. What? Weird enough that a manga store is advertising in a subway, but what in Bolgi's name is a warehouse? And then there's Texas Pete's Taco and Waffle House. Okay, I've heard of chicken and waffles, but tacos? And if it's a Waffle House, shouldn't there be letters missing from the sign? And this one's how we know Hell already has a foothold on the city. Got mad cow? Get it at the Angry Bovine. That's not how you get people hungry for hamburgers. The graphics are average for the time. Everything is sufficiently detailed. Spawn's model looks awesome. The tattered cape looks great, and there are some nice details, like Spawn's bloody footprints after he's hacked up some demons. The game is realistic looking enough to make me a little grossed out in the really gruesome sections, like the bloodbath room in Wynn's headquarters. Yeesh. I guess this is the sort of stuff that draws in Spawn fans. The graphics finally caught up to deliver, so you don't have to expect a compelling story or inspired gameplay. I also hope the brutality is enough to help you get past the really confusing parts, like not knowing when a door is a door. And no, none of them are ever ajar. That would be helpful. Sometimes you have to complete some task before you can go through a door, even though you can never be sure if the one you're trying to go through is supposed to open, and there's rarely any sign you've accomplished the right goal except trying to go in, which is incredibly awkward because the enter a door button is the jump button. Any other button would be better than jump. What moron thought that was a good idea? You have to stand in just the right spot or you'll jump. So sometimes you'll think you had the wrong door because you're bouncing like an idiot when you were right all along. And then there are doors you never think you could enter, like the one that leads inside a mountain in hell. That is a cavernous entrance with nothing behind it. It looks closed off. Oh, and how about the stairwells where the stairs are going up when you just went up and you're looking at it behind you? And then there's the transporter maze on the Angel space station. Yeah, Heaven ripped off Star Trek and built a transporter room. I was probably wandering around this thing for 2 hours and couldn't figure out what the heck I was supposed to do. You've got to blow up more of those accursed cylinders, but I must have missed a portal someplace because I kept going in circles while time got further away from me, and hope grew dimmer and dimmer. Every time I saw the screen that said try again, I just wanted to cry again. And then I remembered what Tiny Adam West said about doing whatever it takes, and I realized that my honorless, shameless opponent here was the game itself. And if it was going to play dirty, well, so would I. So I concentrated all my Mountain Dew powered energy and produced the level select code. Push start and then up, down, left, right, right, right. And to confirm I had successfully entered the code, I heard Keith David say something I never thought I'd hear anyone say: Necrolicious. Keith David got paid to say Necrolicious. And then I defeated the final boss in like 2 minutes. Yes, I cheated, and no, I'm not proud of it. But that was the test, and I passed. 15 more days left here, and I am not going to wind up in Spawn here forever over a cryptic sequence of doors. Here's hoping I don't have to deal with anything like that when I fight the emissary of Coke. But I am ready now, Coca-Cola. Bring it on. Signed, Captain Spawn.